from a special. This video is due to a special request from a viewer who wanted me to do a talk about France and Russia. And the last video I did was Hitler's biggest mistake in World War II. I talked a lot about the Russian invasion, although that wasn't what I considered the biggest mistake. But I said, okay, I was going to do a video about a video called A Union of States or an Empire, about U.S. politics. I have some Tecate here. I guess I should be drinking Kronenbourg, but I'll put that off a little bit. I don't want to put it off for long, though, A Union of States or an Empire. But this one is about Napoleon and the invasion of Russia. Well, I always did like the aroma for Tecate and the flavor. I think it's the best mass-produced Mexican beer. Anyway, much like the German attack on Russia, June 22nd, 1941, the French attack, the French Empire's attack on the Russian Empire in 1812 was done not because France was winning this great Napoleonic conflict, but really because France was losing, much like the German attack was because Germany was losing, really. Let's look at the situation, and I'll show you a map. But 1789, we had the French Revolution, which was an internal revolution. But the goal of it was actually for it to become a world revolution. And I don't want to get into the whole history of that, but it was very chaotic. And it led to the murder of Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette, and Louis XVII, his murder as well. But and then the fanatics, the Jacobins taking over, but not lasting very long because of their extremism. And then the Directory being established after they were ousted. The Directory was more moderate revolutionaries, a gang of people running France, a gang of men. In Latin America, they would be called a junta. Napoleon was an obscure French artillery commander, and through this chaos, he was able to rise up in the French army because France had gone to war with basically the rest of the world in 1792. He made a name for himself when a royalist faction tried to stage a coup, and Napoleon ordered the army to fire at the group, saving the Revolutionary Republic from an overthrow. And he was able to more or less weasel his way to the top. And in 1799, there was a coup attempt which succeeded. Napoleon established himself as a dictator of a triumvirate, two other guys, and he got his. But he was able to eventually get them out of the way, not have them killed, but move them out. And he got himself appointed consul. We would call it president. Okay, so president of France, or they call it consul. And he had dictatorial powers, but the Bonapartes were not satisfied with that. So he was able to, in 1804, get himself elected, so-called elected French emperor. And then later on, his nephew in 1848 followed the same thing, getting himself elected French president, and then 4 years later elected Napoleon II Bonaparte French emperor. But we're going to focus on their original and most famous Napoleon Bonaparte the First. He had a knack for visionary thinking when it came to military tactics. So he used speed especially, but he was able to conquer Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, Prussia and Austria being the two major states of the Holy Roman Empire, even defeating Russia. And the British, he defeated them, but not on the ocean, not in the sea. Now, so on land, France by 1808, you could see France was able to conquer all of the Netherlands and make it a province of France. Most of Italy, well, all of Italy, but making parts of it part of France. In fact, what we would call today Croatia, part of France. The Holy Roman Empire was conquered and turned into the Confederation of the Rhine, which was a French puppet state. The Kingdom of Italy was a French puppet state. Spain and Prussia and the Austrian Empire were forced to become French allies reluctantly, but they had no choice. Denmark also became a French ally, and Sweden, he was even able to place Marshal Bernadotte, a French commander, on the throne of Sweden. And in fact, the Bernadotte dynasty is still on the throne of Sweden today. Now, but he had some, much like Germany, Napoleonic France was able to establish a huge land empire. All of Spain, well, first he forced Spain to become an ally. Then he and this was his downfall, we'll get back to that. But he took over Italy, except for Sicily Island. He was not able to conquer Sicily, which was protected by the British Navy, and the Kingdom of Sicily, a Bourbon kingdom, remained independent, an ally of Great Britain. The Ottoman Empire was a Muslim empire that could care less which European country won as long as they were left alone. So they were more or less neutral in this conflict. But Italy became a puppet state. The Confederation of the Rhine became a puppet state. Austria and Prussia, allies. All right. And the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, which we call Poland today, a French puppet state. With their own leaders, but really under the control of Napoleon. Now here's where he started to screw up. 1808. Now he had this huge empire. Now he already had a problem because the British Navy defeated the French and Spanish navies in engagements, very significant naval engagements, which established British naval superiority, much like in World War I and World War II, which led to the defeat of Germany and their allies. So the British were able to control the sea, and that caused France to be bottled up. Yes, they controlled vast territories, okay, stretching from Poland to Spain. Okay, here's where the mistakes came in. I mean, it's already a mistake to try to take over Europe. I mean, it's not going to work. He decides he's not satisfied to have the Bourbon King of France, the Bourbon King of Spain as an ally. So he tricked them into visiting him, and he basically kidnapped the King and Queen of Spain and put his brother on the throne in 1808. The Spanish people would have no part of that, and they started to revolt. And so what ends up happening is France had to have thousands and thousands of troops all over Spain to try to control the populace, fighting a long guerrilla war supported by British arms and even troops in some cases. The British also went in and helped Portugal. The Portuguese king fled Portugal. He left Portugal so that he didn't become a Napoleonic puppet or even captured by France. So that's the first breakdown there. Now, all across Europe, at first, when France had this great revolution, to a large extent or almost completely controlled by Freemasonry, other Masonic groups around Europe and nationalist groups rose up to help France because they said, hooray, we can get rid of the old reactionary governments and we can have this new progressive government, and then all the countries can team up and we can have this brotherhood of man and all of that stuff. But there was one little problem. When France came in to liberate your country from the old regime, you would very quickly notice that the French troops had a habit of not leaving your country, and they also had a habit of really essentially making your country a part of France. In other words, they were not there to bring liberty and fraternity and brotherhood. They were there to bring French imperial control. So you started having Germans and Italians saying, wait a minute, we thought this was all about a brotherhood of man, not French domination. So you started to have nationalist groups that maybe before were pro-French, becoming very quickly anti-French. So they had to have troops all over Germany and Italy try to keep these, and the Netherlands try to keep these groups down that might try to revolt. Then Napoleon's got problems in Spain, got to fight this guerrilla war. Oh, they went around shooting Spaniard people left and right, rounding up Spanish and shooting them down. But those Spaniards had a bad habit. They had a bad way about them. They would not surrender. They just kept killing as many French as they could. Of course, they had help from the British, whose navy could supply the rebels at any point around Spain. Now, Napoleon, the French economy starts to go downhill because the British blockade is putting the clamps on economic activity. It's hurting the British economy also, but it's really hurting the French and European economy. So he tries to make this European system where all the European countries will trade with each other and not trade with Great Britain and their allies. Kind of like Germany did in World War II. We're just going to have this European system. We'll all trade with each other, and that failed. All right. And so we're going to all trade with each other. But how is he going to monitor it? France has got to try to monitor all the countries and make sure they're not trading with Great Britain. It's impossible to do that. They can't be everywhere at all times. So they find that that's an impossible dream, and the black market is flourishing, and people are trading. Even France is trading. French assets are trading with the British Empire. Napoleon's also worried because Louis XVIII, the brother of Louis the 16th and uncle of Louis the 17th, the successor to the French throne, is in exile in Great Britain. He's always a threat because there's a pretty strong royalist element inside France that wants to overthrow the revolution and bring back the Catholic Bourbon dynasty. Now, Napoleon defeated Russia, so he tells the Russian Tsar, hey, you make sure you only trade with me. Now, at first, the Russians were worried about being invaded, so they thought, oh, France is strong. Okay, fine, we'll go along with this continental plan. We'll only trade with France. But after a while, it's hurting Russia's economy. I mean, they don't want to go downhill for France. So in 1812, the Russian Tsar Alexander says, look, I need to have a meeting with you because, well, we're just going to start trading with Great Britain again. We're not going to go downhill for you. You wanted to bite off all of this territory and you can't control it and it's hurting you, but that's your problem. It's not my problem. So you can see that France was already suffering a lot because of their war in Spain that they can't win, the British naval blockade. So he doesn't want to go to war with France. He just tells France, look, we're going to trade with whoever we want to trade with. So too bad. So Napoleon said, we're going to have a meeting. We're having a meeting, kind of like Germany, Hitler did with Stalin in 1940. We better have a meeting. Okay, so they have a meeting on the border of the Grand Duchy of Warsaw and Russia, and Napoleon's thrown a fit. You better not back out on my trade agreement that I made with you, and you better not trade with Great Britain. And the Russian Tsar basically says, look, we're going to do what we want. That's your problem. It's not my problem. Napoleon threw his hat down and everything. I'll show you. So the Russian Tsar said, do what you want. I don't care. So he went back to Russia, and Napoleon decided, that's it. We're gonna hit Russia. Well, he had to hit Russia because think about it. If he doesn't attack Russia and Russia is allowed to start trading openly with Great Britain in defiance of the continental system, and they can get away with it without any repercussions, then basically you're going to see the rest of Europe, Austria, Kingdom of Prussia, and it'll just be like a domino effect. They'll all just start trading with Great Britain, and France will go downhill. Which, if Napoleon would have had good sense, he would have said, all right, fine, I'm giving up my empire, and I'm bringing all my troops back to France, and I'm staying on the throne, and we'll let everybody go free. But he doesn't. It's like the tar baby story. He's caught. The more he wrestles, the more he gets covered with tar. So he decides we're going to attack Russia with the Grand Army. Well, he doesn't have enough French soldiers to invade. They've been fighting wars since 1792, right? So 20 years now. And France doesn't have enough soldiers to go in. So they have this motley crew, this patchwork collection of all kind of nationalities to go fight Russia. Similar to Germany in 1941, there weren't enough German troops to fight Russia, so they had to have help from Finland, Hungary, Romania, and Spain sent a little handful of troops. And some other, and as the time went on with Russia, Germany got other Europeans to go fight on their side against Russia, which didn't work anyway. But okay, so in 1812, the Grand Army launches this major attack into Russia towards Moscow, the capital, or, well, the former capital, right? Because St. Petersburg was the capital since Peter the Great. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so they're going toward Moscow, the big city, anyway. That was Lenin that moved the capital back to Moscow in 1918 because he felt that St. Petersburg, right there in the Baltic Sea, was too vulnerable to invasion. And we know it was because Germany put a siege on St. Petersburg and Leningrad from 1941 to 44. All right, so this Napoleonic army, 600,000 men punching into Russia, and they're having a lot of success, moving pretty quickly towards Moscow. And Napoleon thought that was interesting that they were able to relatively easily get close to Moscow and even into Moscow. But he realized that when they took over the city that he had been trapped. The Russian armies had been ordered to basically withdraw and to let France be sucked deep into Russia. This is similar to what happened in 1941. So their lines of supply are so stretched. They have to bring supplies from France and other parts of Europe deep into Russia. When they get to the Moscow, we're here. The city was set alight and it burned. All the buildings, you know, many buildings were burned. And Napoleon realized we've been tricked. This was no great victory. The Russians were simply melting away. And now I'm in trouble because it's going to be the greatest counterattack in history. So he realizes we have to get out, and we have to get out now. Like when Chekhov looked at that belt buckle and it said Botany Bay, he knew they better get out of that and get off of that planet quick. All right, so they start to withdraw. Well, when they withdraw, they find out it's not going to be so easy because now the great counterattack is going to come. And so there's Russian armies hitting them from the north, the west, and the south. The north, the east, and the south, excuse me. And so Napoleon's armies trying desperately to get back to French-controlled territory, and they're being chopped apart. Then they get bottled up right at the border, trying to get out. And Napoleon, in his classic way, when his troops are threatened, he abandons them, just like he did in Egypt in 1798. He wasn't going to go down with the ship, figuratively. Good luck, chaps. I'm gone. I got to go build a career in France. And now in 1813, good luck, chaps. I'm gone. I have to get back to Paris. So the French army starts to retreat back into Poland. The Russians on their tail. Well, now the great alliance that Napoleon has cobbled together through force and threats, Prussia and Austria, they see that now France has suffered a terrible defeat. And Prussia and Austria say, oh, by the way, those treaties we signed with you, we're ripping them apart and we're at war with you again. A treaty signed under a threat of violence is no treaty anyway. A real treaty is between parties of equals. So they renounced the treaties, and Austria and the kingdom, the Austrian Empire and the Kingdom of Prussia and the Russian Empire are now attacking the French army, which is withdrawing in order. Now, the French were very disciplined, so it's not like Napoleon's army is just going to collapse. They withdraw slowly back to France, and they're able to fight some battles and have some tactical victories, but strategically they're in trouble. Now the British start to send large numbers of troops into Portugal and Spain. He's in real trouble because he's got The invaders from the east, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, pushing France's army back towards France. The Italians start to rise up, and there's an invasion launched, and it comes through southern Italy, similar to 1943. And then there's the British and Spanish and Portuguese troops pushing the French through the Iberian Peninsula. So he's having to fight a war on not just 3 fronts, Iberia, Spain, Italy, and Central Europe, but 4 fronts, the sea, the war at sea, which France was losing already and never could win. So he gets back to Paris in 1814 and says, okay, well, we'll just call the war off, call it even. And the Allies say, you're crazy, you're out of here. He said, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll resign and I'll abdicate, let my little son become Napoleon II. How do you like that? And we promise we won't try to take over any more territory. We'll all behave. And the Allies say, you're not going to get away with that. You can't be trusted. You're the king of liars, which he was. And he was forced to go into exile and become the prince of a little island off the coast of Italy called Elba. And they said, that's going to be your position from now on. You could be the prince of Elba. He was so discouraged by that. He did escape in 1815 and reconquer France and got his faction to help him out. But there was a second war against him, and there was a pretty close fought battle in what we call Belgium today at Waterloo in 1815, and the Prussian and British armies were able to defeat him. And he was permanently put into exile in 1815 by being sent to St. Helena Island. And St. Helena Island is a little tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There was no way he was escaping from that island. So now Napoleon did reorganize France. Now he had a knack for doing this. He gave France the Bank of France, which is still in business today, to centralize their monetary authority, making much more sense with their money system. He was able to establish the French educational system, which is very centralized in France. In America, some people want that too, but some conservative Americans would be against the centralized educational system. But he set up a lot of structural or infrastructure in France that helped France become a major world power, even in some ways a stronger world power. But he proved some things. France could be a strong world power, but trying to take over Europe and having this far-flung empire was actually only going to make France weaker and destroy Napoleon's power. Now, his nephew took over in 1848, like I told you, decades later. And he got rid of a lot of the chaos that was going on in France. And he also organized France into a strong, centralized government, and he made France an extremely powerful country in Europe in the 1850s and 60s, but as Napoleon III. But he had a problem too, because he had this mind on conquering territory, and he had a very sort of belligerent attitude, and Europeans didn't trust him. He teamed up with the British though this time. But they went off and had this war against Russia, which was a fiasco in Crimea. Tried to take over Mexico, which turned out to be a fiasco. Then he got into this war with Germany in 1870, which he was baited into going to war against, by Bismarck, and that was a fiasco. So if Napoleon III maybe had enough sense to not try to mimic his uncle, he might have stayed in power much longer. But and then his son, Louis Napoleon, was killed in battle with the Zulus in southern Africa, believe it or not. But anyway, back to Russia, 1812. The point of that story is they did not invade Russia because they were winning and they wanted to take over the world. Napoleon invaded Russia because he was losing and he could not figure a way out of the terrible situation in which he had put himself. The moral of the story is countries should not invade Russia. The moral of not to say that they should either, but the moral of the story is countries like France and Germany should not get themselves involved in big wars Because when you get involved in a war, you never know what's going to happen. And it oftentimes will not turn out the way that you believe it is going to turn out. So a country that wants to remain strong and in good financial standing and have happy citizens probably would do well to avoid getting involved in a war in the first place. And that is the lesson we learned from the last video. Germany's biggest mistake in World War II. Hitler's biggest mistake was getting into World War II. Okay, the next video will be a union of states or an empire. That's the title of the next video. Thank you for watching this video production. I'd be curious to see what your comments are about this topic.